We've got Alain Tolhurst with us, chief reporter at PoliticsHome. Lots of stories to get through here, including that Hamas documentary. Alan, it's back in the news. Well, it's never left the news agenda for the last week. Kemi Badenoch has now waded in on this, calling for investigation into whether licence fee money was given to Hamas during the production of this documentary. Let's have a little snippet of the programme for those who haven't seen it, and it gives you a little taster of what it's all about.
Everything's changed since the war started. I was in the best school in Gaza, the British school in the north. All my lessons were in English. Now I'm here living in a tent.
This is our new way of transportation.
So there it was, Alan. I mean, I think we all know the backstory now. It's just an ordinary kid. Oh, his dad happened to be a terrorist, but other than that, it was an ordinary kid who was fronting a documentary. Kemi Badenoch has said, look, you know, we need to know more about this. Was licence payers' money used to pay anybody that was, you know, further down the line? That could have been the case. We know that MPs, I think today, are questioning members of the BBC, or certainly this week, about, you know, how this got to air without several factors. And there's not just this scrutiny over the one boy that fronted it. He's very good, by the way. It's just been handy to know who he is. And various other people involved in the programme and their connections as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Commons, the Culture, Media and Sport Committee, are going to. They've said that the chair, Caroline Danish, said they're going to get BBC bosses in. I'm not sure when necessarily it's going to happen, whether it's going to happen this week, but certainly it's going to be pretty high up in their discussions. And yeah, it does feel as though the more we hear about this, the more kind of sort of lack of really due diligence. Really, obviously that this was not made by the BBC in house; it was a production company. But obviously, how these checks weren't done, how this kind of investigation into, as you say, the backgrounds of those people involved, I just find it really surprising that, you know, given it's such a sensitive subject, and for the BBC, it's their credibility that's on the line when this goes out and is on the iPlayer for the world to see. Yeah, it's very surprising that this wasn't, you know, able to be found, given how quickly after the programme was on, you know, other people managed to make those links that the BBC hadn't done themselves. And so, and the BBC has not done itself a great deal of favours here, because clearly the work could have been done before, and these were not, you know, these were pretty open things that people were able to do. This wasn't, you know, a huge investigation needed to be done. People just did a bit of open source investigation, and they found it out. And if that was possible by people, you know, on Twitter, basically, then why hadn't the BBC worked that out before this programme went to broadcast?
And even if you were going to use this young lad to do this, I mean, there's no world in which you would make a documentary that you wouldn't reference that his father is a senior Hamas official. I mean, you would just say that. Even if you still went ahead with the documentary, you would have to still say and declare a little bit of the backstory. The kid's telling you, I went to, you know, this great school. He's clearly an educated child. You can hear by how good his English is and everything. But journalistically, of course you would say, you know, it's important to point out that his old man is part of Hamas.
Yeah, and I think also, as some people have pointed out, it would be a surprise that this person wasn't involved in some way, his family wouldn't be involved with the Hamas government that runs Gaza, because there's no way that he would be able to, because of the way that Hamas controls Gaza and controls information in Gaza. The whole reason that the production company were done was because it's very difficult to get into Gaza, partly due to obviously the Israeli restrictions, but also because obviously you've got to be careful in there because of the way that Hamas runs it. So I think it would be naive to think that if this person, this incredibly, as you say, eloquent and interesting child, who, you know, no criticism should be placed upon him, obviously, but if you're having access to him and to others, you have to ask questions. Why would you be given access to these people to film this documentary if, you know, in a place where it's essentially, as you say, run by a terrorist organization that kind of controls that kind of information? So I think, yeah, the fact is that those questions weren't asked, and you say that the documentary could still work if you had those disclaimers in place, if you made it, if you made the audience aware, because you would say to them, there's a reason why we've got to speak to these people, because they're the only people that are available to us under an area that's controlled by Hamas. So yeah, as I say, just a bit of an own goal on multiple fronts here from the BBC.
Just a little bit. It'd be interesting to know whether the BBC will work with the, you know, various production company or those responsible for putting it together in the future. This one I thought was also interesting as well, Alan. Just 1 in 6 energy bosses think that net zero by 2050 is achievable. This is down from nearly half last year. Now, this is, if you're Keir Starmer and the government, and I think if the Conservatives were in power, the same target pretty much would have existed. So, I mean, this would be, I would have thought, for Ed Miliband, a fairly worrying move. I don't know who the one of the 6 is, but the other 5 think this is likely to not happen.
Yeah, there seems to be a bit of a industry confidence seems to have taken a bit of a battering, I think, in the past year. Whether necessarily that's because of a big break in policy, I'm not really sure. Whether it's less kind of confidence in Ed Miliband's leadership running that department that's going to be overseeing it all. Obviously, we've got Great British Energy coming in as well, so it's hard to know what necessarily has been the factors behind it. But clearly, if the government is going to hit this target, it needs to take industry with them, because it's not the government. As I said, GB Energy is going to be part of it, but it's going to require the big companies to be a huge part of that change as we move forward. And if they're not confident that they're going to be able to achieve that, then it seems less likely that the government is going to hit that, what is already a pretty difficult target to try and hit in such a short space of time. So yeah, I think there'll be lots of work. I remember we heard about kind of Rachel Reeves when she was helping to try and get the city on side. There was these smoked salmon breakfasts. So I imagine Ed Miliband's going to have to go on a similar sort of circuit to try and win back the confidence of these big companies.
Yeah, and Rachel Reeves ate more smoked salmon than any human should ever eat during that period of time. Alan, always great to have you on. Thank you, Alain Tolhurst. He is, of course, chief reporter at PoliticsHome.